And thinking about all five of those things, and the way searches typically get done. Um, Oftentimes, if you're someone who's not actively involved in the search on a team, what there are 3 points I think that you hear. We're number one, we're looking for this role. We're going to start searching for the role.
Mhm.
You might receive an email that says, "Here's the link to the job description," and then the third thing is, "Here's who we hired." Or we didn't find anyone. We're posting it again, or we're retooling the role. So like traditionally, typically, those are the three intersection points that most people experience if they're not actively on the search committee for a role. They might not even be on the team that's being. There might be a team lead who's being hired for the team, and that's still all that the people hear about that
Mhm.
are on the team. So, like over 3 months, you hear three things, um, and here's the start date. And so, really thinking about those fundamentals and how do those fundamentals show up in ways for everyone in the organization to be
Mhm.
involved, and really think about how do you shift power, transparency, diverse perspectives, different voices. And so when we think about like how actually people who can be how people can be involved who are not on the search committee, and also not everyone wants to be involved in the search committee, will be able to serve on the search committee. So how can we think about like how information flows and what we can share? And so there's more or less 4 places where we think
Mhm.
about that. One is around transparency with sharing detailed process updates. This is also either on a bi-weekly basis or a monthly basis around like here's what happened in the search thus far to the extent you're able from a confidentiality standpoint. And that might be like we're not going to say who the candidates are to keep them protect their confidentiality, and we might not quite share yet. That's a really weird way of phrasing it. We might not share yet what we asked people in the interview process, because if this lands and we need to go back again, we want to make sure that we still have all the scenarios and stuff that don't get out there, because
Mhm.
the last stage in the process is to share everything, all the scripts, all the questions, everything from the process, so people can really engage in the organization with the rigor that went into the search process. So sharing detailed transparency updates with the entire team is one way that people will intersect in a process differently from a typical search.
Mhm. Yeah, and so we've referenced a few times the conversations that I've led, sort of lead going into searches like this, which are often one-on-one or small group conversations to help sketch out that position profile, the role, the ecosystem that the role interacts within, those kinds of things, to really build the um, the grounding or the context of the opportunity in a way that is as inclusive as possible. And so, like I said, you could talk to 5 people and get a pretty you know, rich assessment. But when you talk to, you know, 12 people, 20 people, 30 people, depending on the size of the organization and the number of staff members or different stakeholders, you're filling in, you're really like coloring in, enhancing the understanding of the nuance of the context of the role and how things interplay. And so people are able to share their stories in it, but they're also able to understand how that story is evolving, right? We can have some really old stories that we think are part of, what the current story is. But through talking to people and through working in this way, being transparent, doing things really intentionally, being engaging as we go, we're really starting to have others experience alternatives that can help to sketch to inform the next sketch of that ecosystem.
Both those internal conversations and then how internal conversations are used externally, I think,
Mm-hmm.
is a piece here where um, we've done searches where maybe there's only 5 members on the search committee, but candidates get to hear from 15 people. And so those other 10 people are not at all involved in the active meetings of the interviews, but candidates have an opportunity to hear their perspectives around the organization. And this is where you sort of think about like, what does the search committee members need to do versus how do they really serve as representatives and connectors to these other voices throughout the organization. And so I think that's one of the ways that everyone in the organization or more people in the organization can participate in a search here. And then to 3, reflection. In particular, we use this with the updates, the process updates that we provide, where every one of those updates has a section where we talk about like what's coming next in the search process and what information would be helpful to include. What do people want to know or find important to this search? What are the questions or scenarios would you like to know that people have responded to? If you're hiring for an HR person, you're curious how they would approach pay equity at an organization. And so like, all right, so as we think about the scenarios, how might we craft something that includes that? And then in the next process update, you might say, and here are the 5 scenarios that we gave candidates in this section, including this scenario about pay transparency or pay equity. And so there's this constant loop back to where information is coming from the organization, what people find important, what people would like to know, and then how it's informing this building the plane while you're flying it process. And becomes much more, it's also, I was going to say, much more rigorous and interesting and also kind of exhausting. And that it's not like this, you start with, here's the template we think this search should use. But it's a loose template because as you get more information, both from the candidates, from the committee members, from around the organization, you start to say like, all right, we thought we needed to know this, but now we're sort of tweaking it here and there. And that leads to like the kind of goal of this, or one of the goals, is co-creating a new way of being that is aligned with our values and it enables us to invent a future that does not exist yet, both broadly as a world, an organization, and maybe a microcosm, if you will, or specifically to search. How do we invent a future of search that doesn't exist yet? And this is where the whole process starts to inform that thing. And that's kind of the 4 places that, like, what do we need search to be for this organization right now? And how does that grow? Because it kind of is one of those things where, like, the more you do it, the more you realize there's other ways to do it, and you want to iterate and experiment. And so these are those moments where you reflect on, like, what did we learn? How will this inform what we do next time in ways that are different than what we thought we would do next time? And this is the way that other people in the organization, you might not be involved in this search, but you might be involved in this search. And so this is really that co-creation, like you're sort of, it's the baton where you're handing one baton from one search committee to the next committee, and it's iterating and adjusting as it goes along, more and more creating that future state.
Okay, so Tim, this is a ton of content, and if you're sitting here and you've made it to the end of this video and you're like, this sounds fascinating, I would love to be a part of this, or I can see how it would be useful to have my perspective on this search committee. And then you like flip over and you look at the time commitment and you look at your calendar and you're like, whoa, I don't know if I have capacity. What are some of the things that people can do to kind of consider whether or not they can take on being a member of the selection committee? I think people want to help, but then when they look at the realities of what's on their plates, it might feel overwhelming, just given the kind of high level we've introduced today.
A couple of things come to mind. The first is that not all work is created equal. This is a different type of work. Even from the work that we do, right? Like, we do different types of work. This is kind of energizing work in a way. There's some work that's draining. There's some work that's energizing. There's some work that's intellectually stimulating. There's some work that's all of those things. And so this is a different type of work. And really thinking about like how this might inform your other work The other things that you do. This isn't just about search. It's really like, how do you shift power? How do you create different decision making models? How do you create inclusive processes? A lot of times we're talking to people in organizations who are doing work in anti-racism, decolonizing workplaces, working to create inclusive, just workplaces, and they're like, and they want to do it, and like, this is one of those things where you can actively be involved in that in an organization. And I think that's one of the other things to consider. Like, this is practicing, this is living those values in a way that sometimes might be harder depending on where you are in the organization, what levers you have to pull. And I think that's one of the things where you're like, actually, this is very values aligned. And this is where, like, not all work is created equal. I also think, on the flip side, from an organizational standpoint, recognizing that this is adding more work to those members of the search committee. So how might you shift what's on their plates for the time that they're on the committee? And as we've worked with before in organizations, where, like, it's really important for these 5 people to be in the mix, and we have something coming up that this marketing person is going to be working on. So we need to figure out how someone else is taking an external consultant, or someone is taking over this piece, so that this person can participate. Because we've it's kind of like putting a band together, like, the right mix. It's not just 5 people, like, you're looking for that right mix. And so recognizing both individually what it's going to mean to be involved, and also organizationally what it means for that person to be involved. And so I think for me, that's also going back to, I've been able to do a number of really cool things in my career. There are very few things that land on the list more fun and interesting and just creative than a search process like this. And to be a part of it is rare. And to be a part of it that will then inform how your organization works and shows up and lives values is a very real, tangible way of moving towards that future where those values are part of the way we do our work, embedded in the DNA of the organization, embedded in the DNA of the organization. This is one of those ways to really start to get those values embedded in the DNA. And I think that oftentimes can make up for, and not make up for, that's the trade-off, just provide a different frame for what it means to be involved in something like this.
So I think then we end this video maybe with an invitation, right? If there are barriers that you perceive, or very real barriers to your ability to participate in a committee like this one, please let us know what those are, because we are learning, to a certain extent as we go here too, and the contexts are different. And so if there are barriers that we haven't thought about yet, or that we need to address, or that you need some support addressing in order to be able to participate, please do let us know what those are. And if you have any questions, about anything you've heard here, or things that we might have missed, please, you know how to reach us. And we would love to hear what those are and to help you explore those.
Katrina, as always, wonderful to spend the time with you. And to those who are considering whether this is right for them, come along, join the party. It's
we can't wait to chat more with you.